Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're going to try and strip away the camouflage from modern conflict. I mean, we're so used to thinking about war in a certain way, right?
Mm.
You know, from movies, history books, it's all very kinetic tanks, jets, soldiers in trenches.
The classic Clausewitz definition.
Hmm.
Politics by, other means, usually violent means.
Exactly. But what if the most devastating battles being fought right now today don't involve a single shot being fired? We're looking at a battlefield that is, well, it's inside server farms and shipping manifests and bank clearinghouses.
It's a complete shift from the battlefield to the bank account.
And that's what we're talking about, economic warfare. To help us navigate this, we're doing a deep dive into a really fantastic piece of research. It's called Sanctions, Trade Wars, and Economic Weapons Explained, and it's from Chapter 9 of the War Economy series.
Yeah, it's a heavy hitter of a source, and it basically argues that we've moved past simple blockades into an era of weaponized interdependence.
That phrase really stuck with me, weaponized interdependence. It
Sure.
sounds like a paradox. For decades, we were told that globalization, being connected,
Right.
that was the safety net.
Right.
If we trade together, we won't bomb each other.
The Golden Arches theory, yeah.
Okay.
Two countries with a McDonald's won't go to war. But this source just flips that completely on its head. It says, because the global economy is so tightly woven, trillions in trade, it's created thousands of new pressure points.
Huh.
So if you control a key node like the US dollar or a shipping lane or semiconductor manufacturing, you can just squeeze a rival nation,
Until they suffocate.
pretty much.
So that's our mission today. We want to open up this toolbox, go beyond the headlines. When you hear sanctions, what's actually happening in the plumbing of the financial system? We're going to look at trade wars, high-tech blockades, and what this source calls the nuclear option of financial exclusion.
It's a fascinating and, frankly, a slightly terrifying look at how statecraft really works in the 21st century.
Okay, so let's start with the tool everyone thinks they know, sanctions. It feels like the default foreign policy setting these days. A country misbehaves, we sanction them, but the source draws a big line between the sledgehammer and the scalpel.
Right. And you could sort of think of it as two main tools. Historically, it was all about the sledgehammer.
The sledgehammer?
Yeah, what they call comprehensive sanctions. So think Cuba or Iraq back in the 90s.
Where you're basically just walling off the entire economy.
Exactly. Nothing in, nothing out. The goal is total isolation.
But the collateral damage from that has to be huge.
Oh, massive. With a comprehensive regime, you're not just hurting the dictator. You are bankrupting the bakery, the pharmacy, the average family. The whole economy can collapse.
And that creates a whole new set of problems, right? It could create instability that doesn't even serve your interests.
Exactly. Which is why there was this big policy shift towards smart sanctions. This is the scalpel. Instead of blockading a country, you go after the decision makers. You freeze the assets of one general. You put a travel ban on the oligarchs. You target specific state-owned companies.
It sounds much more precise. But the machinery to actually do that must be mind-boggling. It's not just one person signing a paper.
No, it's a massive bureaucratic engine.
Yeah.
In the U.S., you have this interplay. The State Department handles the diplomatic why.
Okay.
The Commerce Department handles the physical goods, the what,
Mm-hmm.
but the real teeth come from the Treasury Department,
Yeah.
specifically an office called OFAC.
OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. I've heard it called the most powerful agency most people have never heard of.
Without a doubt. OFAC is basically the world's financial radar. They maintain this thing called the SDN list, specially designated nationals.
And if you're on that list...
Your assets in the U.S. are frozen, and no U.S. person can deal with you.
Mm.
And because the U.S. dollar is at the center of everything, it essentially acts as a global financial blacklist.
I want to pivot here, because sanctions and trade wars often get lumped together in the news. But the source says they're fundamentally different things.
They are. Sanctions are usually coercive. You're trying to stop an action, like an invasion or a nuclear program. A trade war is different. It's usually about protecting your own domestic economy.
So it's less you're a bad actor and more you're treating our industry unfairly.
Precisely. And the key feature of a trade war is the cycle. It's
Mhm.
tit for tat. The source uses the U.S.-China trade war from 2018-2019 as the prime example.
Right.
The U.S. said China was stealing IP, subsidizing industries, so it imposed tariffs.
And a tariff is just a tax on imports, basically.
Right, so the U.S. puts a tariff on Chinese steel. China doesn't just take it, they retaliate. They put tariffs on American soybeans.
And then the U.S. escalates again. It's a ladder.
Exactly.
But here's the thing that always confuses me. The rhetoric is always, we are punishing them. But isn't it the consumer at home who actually pays that tax?
That is the economic reality.
Yeah.
The modeling in our source, and the general consensus, is that trade wars reduce welfare for everyone.
For everyone.
Yeah, if you put a 25% tariff on steel, American companies that need that steel to build cars, they now have to pay more, and they pass that cost straight on to you.
So prices go up and supply chains get all tangled up.
And uncertainty just skyrockets.
Yeah.
Businesses hate uncertainty. If you don't know if your costs will jump 20% next month, you don't invest, you don't hire. It's a drag on the whole economy.
Okay, so that's good steel, soybeans. But the source points to a much newer and maybe sharper front in this war. This isn't about old industries, it's about controlling the future. We need to talk about export controls and the high-tech front.
This is maybe the most strategic shift we've seen in the last decade. It's not just about stopping money from moving, it's about stopping innovation from moving.
This is the semiconductor war.
This is the semiconductor war. The logic is, if AI and quantum computing are the keys to future dominance, you cannot let your rival get the chips that power them.
And the weapon here isn't a tariff. It's something called the entity list.
Yes, the entity list is run by the Commerce Department. If a foreign company gets put on this list, any American company that wants to sell to them needs a special license.
And those licenses are hard to get.
The policy is usually a presumption of denial.
Which means don't even bother asking.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the Huawei case study is the perfect example of this power. A few years ago, Huawei was on track to be the biggest smartphone maker in the world.
They were everywhere.
Then they hit the entity list. Suddenly, no American chips. But even worse for them, no Google Android services.
That's the key point, isn't it? It wasn't just hardware. A smartphone without the Google Play Store is a tough sell outside China.
Exactly. Their global market share just collapsed. But there's a technical bit here the source explains that is crucial. It's called the Foreign Direct Product Rule.
That sounds incredibly bureaucratic. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, let's break it down. It's a bit of a mind bender, but it's the ultimate hook, it says. Even if a chip is made in Taiwan or South Korea, if it was manufactured using American tools or American software.
Ah, I see.
The U.S. government says, we have jurisdiction over that chip.
Wow. So because American companies dominate the machinery that makes the chips, the U.S. can tell a factory in Taiwan, you cannot sell to Huawei.
That is the chokehold. It extends U.S. law across the globe. But this also brings up the challenge of multilateralism.
Right, because if you squeeze that hard, don't your allies get a little annoyed?
They do. And if the U.S. blocks a sale, but say a company in Japan steps in to fill the gap, the sanction fails, and the American company just loses business.
So you have to get everyone on the same page.
You have to hunt in a pack, which is why you have things like the Wassenaar Arrangement, which tries to coordinate all this.
Okay, let's move up the escalation ladder. We've covered trade, we've covered tech. Now we get to what the source calls the nuclear option, financial warfare.
This is where the U.S. is just unrivaled. And it all comes down to the role of the dollar and the plumbing of global banking, specifically SWIFT.
Right. We heard about SWIFT constantly in 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine. Kick them off, SWIFT. But let's be clear, SWIFT isn't a bank, is it?
Correct. It's just a messaging service for banks. Think of it like a secure email system. Bank A tells Bank B to move this money.
So if you get kicked off, it's like having your phone line cut. You still have the money, but you can't tell anyone to move it.
Exactly. Slows everything to a crawl. But the real nuclear move in 2022 wasn't just SWIFT. It was freezing Russia's central bank reserves.
This was the $300 billion question.
It was shocking. Central banks hold reserves, usually in safe things like U.S. treasuries, to keep their currency stable. Russia had built this massive sanction-proof war chest.
They thought they were ready for anything.
They thought, we have $600 billion, we can weather the storm.
And then overnight, half of it was just gone, frozen.
Because that money wasn't in a vault in Moscow. It was sitting on digital ledgers in New York, London, and Frankfurt.
So Western nations could just flip a switch.
They basically said, your money is no longer good here. It stopped the Russian central bank from propping up the ruble in those first critical weeks.
But, and we have to be realistic here, the Russian economy didn't totally collapse. Why not?
Adaptation. It's the recurring theme. The target always gets a vote. Russia imposed capital controls, but more importantly, they pivoted their trade.
Stopped selling oil to Europe, started selling it to India and China.
And they built what's called a shadow fleet. Hundreds of old oil tankers owned by shell companies operating outside Western insurance. all to get around the G7 price caps.
It shows even the nuclear option has its limits against a big economy.
A large, resource-rich economy is very hard to kill.
There's one more layer here I want to touch on, secondary sanctions. This feels like the you're either with us or against us rule.
It's a good way to put it. Primary sanctions stop U.S. citizens from trading with a target. Secondary sanctions go a step further. They tell a bank in, say, France or Turkey,
Yeah.
if you do business with our target, we will cut you off from the U.S. financial system.
That is a brutal choice. Even if that bank has zero interest in U.S. politics, they need U.S. dollars to be a global bank.
They have to have them.
Hmm.
They need what are called correspondent banking accounts in New York
Yeah.
to clear dollar transactions. If they lose that, they're basically a local bank.
So they comply.
They over-comply. They de-risk, just dumping any client that even smells like a sanction risk. It's a huge force multiplier for U.S. policy.
So we have this massive, complex, expensive toolbox. We're freezing assets, blocking chips, taxing steel. The big question the source asks is, does it actually work?
And the answer is, well, it's humbling. According to the academic study cited in the material, sanctions only achieve their political goals in about 1/3 of cases.
1/3. That is not a great batting average.
It's low. And there are a lot of reasons why. One is what we just talked about, evasion and adaptation. I mean, look at North Korea, the most sanctioned country on earth.
And yet they have nukes. They have missiles. How are they funding all this?
They have turned evasion into a state-run enterprise. The source talks about ship-to-ship transfers in international waters. A North Korean ship turns off its transponder, pulls alongside a ghost ship, and moves coal or oil.
High seas smuggling.
Plus, they run front companies all through Southeast Asia. And increasingly, they use cybercrime. The Lazarus Group, the North Korean hackers, they steal cryptocurrency to fund the missile program.
So you close a bank account, they just open a crypto wallet. It's a game of whack-a-mole.
Exactly. And then there's the other problem, the ethical one, the human cost.
We mentioned Iraq in the 90s.
Right. Infant mortality went up, public health systems collapsed. The critics argue it's collective punishment, which violates human rights. The defenders say, well, it's better than an actual war. It's a serious dilemma.
Let's use the Iran case study because the source spends a lot of time on it as both a success and a failure.
It's the perfect timeline. In 2012, the U.S. and EU got really serious. They sanctioned the Iranian central bank and their oil exports.
And that hurt them badly.
It crushed their currency, the real. Inflation skyrocketed. And the argument is that this pain is what brought them to the negotiating table for the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
So in that specific case, it worked. The economic pressure created a diplomatic opening.
It did. But then, fast forward to 2018, the Trump administration pulls out of the deal and reimposes maximum pressure.
To get a better deal.
Right. But this time, Iran didn't fold. They adapted. They built what they call a resistance economy. They deepened ties with regional proxies, smuggled oil to China, and restarted their nuclear enrichment.
So it shows that pain doesn't always lead to capitulation.
Exactly.
This all brings us to the future. If adaptation is the name of the game and countries are getting nervous about the weaponized dollar, where is this all headed? The source flags a specific term: de-dollarization.
This is the big long-term risk. If you use the dollar as a weapon too often, people are going to start looking for alternatives.
It's just simple risk management, isn't it? If I'm a central banker in, say, Brazil, and I see what happened to Russia's reserves, I have to be thinking, I need a plan B.
You have to. And we're seeing China aggressively push CIPS, their alternative to SWIFT. Russia has one called SBFS.
Are these a real threat yet?
To be clear, the source notes they're tiny compared to the Western system. The network effects of the dollar are enormous.
Yeah.
It's hard to just leave. But the intent is there.
Mm.
And we are seeing more trade settled in local currencies, yuan, rupees bypassing the dollar completely. If that trend speeds up, the U.S. loses its core economic superpower.
You can't sanction someone who doesn't use your bank.
Exactly.
Speaking of new battlefields, the source also mentions the convergence of economic and cyber warfare.
This line is getting blurrier every day. We talked about North Korean crypto theft, but think about ransomware. If a state-sponsored group takes down a pipeline, like the Colonial Pipeline, that's an economic attack. It disrupts energy prices. It causes panic.
So the battlefield is the server, the bank, and the ground itself. The source brings up green economic warfare.
Or resource warfare.
Yeah.
Look, we are moving from an oil-based economy to a mineral-based one. For EVs, wind turbines, missiles, you need lithium, cobalt, rare earths.
And who controls the supply of those minerals?
China overwhelmingly dominates the processing of them. So you can imagine a future where instead of an oil embargo, we're facing a rare earth embargo,
Or something called carbon border adjustments?
which is just a fancy term for green tariffs.
Yeah.
The EU is already doing this. If you want to sell steel to Europe, but your factory emits too much CO2, you're going to pay a tax. This is a new kind of trade barrier.
It really feels like the definition of a strategic asset has just expanded to include everything. Your data, your currency, your minerals, your carbon footprint.
That's the reality of statecraft now. Everything is dual use.
Ah.
Everything is a point of leverage.
So to wrap this deep dive up, we've looked inside this massive toolbox. We've seen that economic warfare is, well, it's efficient. It's cheaper than deploying an aircraft carrier.
But it's also leaky. It have, what, a 30% success rate? It can create instability that backfires, and it forces your rivals to build an immune system against you.
Which leads to this final sort of philosophical thought to leave you with. We started this by talking about how interconnectedness prevents war.
Hmm.
But everything we've just discussed points toward fragmentation. You hear terms like friendshoring, de-dollarization, splinter nets.
We seem to be actively dismantling that interdependence.
So if we succeed in building these separate, insulated economic blocks, a Western one and an Eastern one, where we don't need each other's chips or money, do we lose the very thing that was holding back a shooting war?
That is the dark irony, isn't it? By trying to fight with our wallets to avoid war, we might be removing the economic cost of starting an actual war.
If there's nothing left to lose by bombing each other, does the threshold for conflict get dangerously low? Does economic warfare in the long run actually make real war more likely? That is a heavy thought to chew on.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive.